Have you ever noticed how enormous aircraft like the Airbus A340 seem almost underpowered? Four slim, almost tiny engines dangling under the wings of a jet designed to cross oceans? It just doesn't look right. Most people expect big planes to have massive engines, like the Boeing 747 or 777, yet Airbus went in a completely different direction. Was it a mistake? Was the A340 doomed from the start? Or was there a very clever reason behind those small engines? Today, we're diving into the fascinating story of why Airbus built one of the strangest airliners in aviation history. When Airbus unveiled the A340 in the early 1990s, the aviation world raised its eyebrows. Here was a brand new long-range wide-body jet designed to compete with Boeing's 747 and the upcoming 777. But unlike its rivals, the A340 didn't rely on two gigantic power plants or four massive engines. Instead, it carried four surprisingly small ones, engines that looked almost delicate when matched against the size of the airplane. To most passengers, the A340 didn't appear intimidating like the 747 or sleek like the twin-engine 777. Its four slim CFM56 turbofans gave the jet a unique, almost unusual look, and that visual quirk left many asking the same question: why would Airbus design a huge transcontinental aircraft with such tiny engines? To answer that, we need to step back into the world of commercial aviation in the 1980s. At the time, airlines faced a dilemma. Twin-engine jets, like the Boeing 767, were cheaper to operate, but strict ETOPS regulations limited where they could fly. ETOPS, short for Extended Range Twin-Engine Operational Performance Standards, restricted how far a two-engine jet could be from the nearest diversion airport. Crossing long stretches of ocean or remote regions wasn't always possible without detours. That gave three- and four-engine aircraft a natural advantage. The Boeing 747 reigned as the queen of the skies and flying effortlessly across oceans without ETOPS worries. Airbus saw an opportunity. If they could build a smaller, more efficient four-engine jet, they could offer airlines long-range flexibility at lower cost. The solution came in the form of the Airbus A340. By pairing the proven A330 fuselage with four engines, Airbus delivered an airplane that didn't need ETOPS approval. And the choice of engines was deliberate. Airbus used the CFM56, a well-known and highly reliable power plant already flying on narrow-body aircraft like the A320 and Boeing 737. Smaller engines meant lower development costs, widespread availability of spare parts, and proven reliability. So while the A340's engines looked tiny, they represented clever engineering for their time. Airbus wasn't trying to outmuscle Boeing with raw power. Instead, they wanted to build a jet that could go anywhere in the world with maximum safety and minimum regulatory hurdles. And this is where the story gets really interesting, because those small engines gave the A340 both its greatest strength and its ultimate weakness. If you're enjoying this journey into aviation history, don't forget to hit subscribe and join the James Avia community for more fascinating stories from the skies. At first glance, the Airbus A340's engines seem almost laughably small for such a large airplane. Each of its four CFM56 turbofans produced around 34,000 pounds of thrust. Compare that to the Boeing 777's GE90 engines, which could generate well over 90,000 pounds of thrust each, and you start to see why people thought the A340 looked underpowered. But the key point is this: the A340 didn't need massive engines to do its job. Airbus designed the A340 for efficiency, safety, and reliability, not for brute force. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, airlines cared deeply about three things: fuel economy, range, and regulatory flexibility. And at that time, four smaller engines ticked all those boxes. First, there was the issue of safety. Aviation authorities were extremely cautious about letting two-engine aircraft fly long transoceanic routes. If one engine failed mid-flight, a twin jet would be forced to divert quickly, often taking long detours over land instead of direct ocean crossings. That was not only inconvenient, but also expensive. Four-engine aircraft, on the other hand, had a built-in advantage. If one engine failed, the airplane could still continue safely with three, and in extreme cases, even with two. This gave airlines and regulators confidence to schedule the A340 on long-haul routes without worrying about ETOPS limitations. Second, Airbus's choice of the CFM56 was all about proven technology. By the early 1990s, the CFM56 was already a workhorse engine, flying on thousands of narrow-body jets like the Boeing 737 Classic and the Airbus A320. Airlines trusted it because it had an excellent safety record and widespread support networks. Spare parts were easy to source, mechanics already knew how to service it, and costs were predictable. For airlines, that meant less training, less risk, and more reliability. Third, there was the issue of development costs. Designing an entirely new large turbofan would have been enormously expensive and time-consuming. By using a slightly modified version of an existing engine, Airbus avoided billions in research and development. This allowed them to bring the A340 to market faster and cheaper than if they had waited for a brand new high-thrust engine. And here's another clever benefit. 4 smaller engines meant that each one didn't have to work as hard individually. That spread the workload and, in theory, reduced wear and tear. In a world where airlines were still cautious about new designs, the A340's safe bet approach appealed to many carriers. In fact, airlines like Lufthansa, Air France, and Cathay Pacific quickly adopted the A340. They appreciated that it could fly long routes over the Atlantic, Pacific, or remote regions of Africa without being constrained by ETOPS rules. And for passengers, the experience was smooth and quiet. Many travelers even described the A340 as one of the most comfortable long-haul aircraft they'd ever flown, thanks to its balanced design and lower cabin noise. So while the engines may have looked small, they were exactly what Airbus needed at the time. They provided safety, regulatory freedom, and cost efficiency in one package. The A340 wasn't built to win a "who has the biggest engine" contest. It was built to solve a very specific problem of its era. But aviation never stands still. Just as the A340 was finding its place in the skies, Boeing was preparing a challenger that would change the rules forever and expose the A340's greatest weakness. Just as Airbus was celebrating the A340's arrival, Boeing was quietly preparing a revolution. In the early 1990s, the Boeing 777 rolled onto the scene, and it completely changed the way airlines thought about long-haul aviation. The 777 was a twin-engine aircraft, but its engines weren't just large, they were colossal. General Electric's GE90, Pratt & Whitney's PW4000, and Rolls-Royce's Trent 800 powered the 777 with nearly 3 times the thrust of an individual A340 engine. These engines weren't just strong, they were efficient, reliable, and most importantly, certified under expanding ETOPS rules. And by the mid-1990s, regulators were becoming more confident in the reliability of modern turbofans. ETOPS rules were relaxed, allowing twin-engine jets to fly up to 180 minutes away from the nearest diversion airport, and eventually, even longer. Suddenly, the A340's main selling point, its 4 engines, was no longer an advantage. In fact, it became a disadvantage. Why? Because 4 engines meant 4 times the maintenance checks, 4 times the spare parts, and 4 times the potential for mechanical issues. A twin jet like the 777 was cheaper to operate, simpler to maintain, and more fuel efficient. Airlines quickly realized that 2 giant engines could do the same job as 4 small ones and do it at a lower cost. The results spoke for themselves. Airlines began shifting orders away from the A340 and toward the 777. Boeing's jet offered similar range, greater payload, and superior economics. The very thing that once made the A340 attractive, its 4 tiny engines, had now become the reason it was less competitive. Airbus tried to keep the A340 relevant, introducing upgraded models like the A340-500 and A340-600, with more powerful engines and longer range. But by then, the tide had turned. The future belonged to efficient twin jets, and Boeing had set the standard. Still, the A340 earned respect among pilots and passengers. It was comfortable, quiet, and dependable. But in the unforgiving economics of the airline industry, comfort alone wasn't enough to keep it in the skies. In the next part, we'll explore what happened to the A340 fleet, why some airlines still fly it today, and how it became a cult favorite among aviation enthusiasts. By the 2000s, the writing was already on the wall for the Airbus A340. Airlines were steadily shifting their fleets to more efficient twin-engine aircraft like the Boeing 777 and later the Airbus A350. These jets offered everything the A340 could, but at a lower operating cost. Fuel prices were climbing and airlines couldn't ignore the economics. 4 engines simply burned more fuel than 2, no matter how reliable they were. The A340's decline accelerated after 2008, when the global financial crisis forced airlines to tighten budgets. Suddenly, running a fuel-hungry 4-engine aircraft became a burden. Carriers like Virgin Atlantic, Singapore Airlines, and Emirates began phasing out their A340 fleets in favor of newer twins. Even Airbus quietly shifted its focus toward the A350, a direct acknowledgement that the age of the 4-engine jet was over. Yet despite its commercial struggles, the A340 carved out a unique place in aviation history. For one, it proved that Airbus could build a long-haul aircraft capable of standing toe-to-toe with Boeing's giants. While it didn't dominate the market, it gave Airbus invaluable experience in designing wide-body aircraft and paved the way for the A350's success. More importantly, the A340 became something of a cult classic among aviation enthusiasts. Pilots loved its handling, describing it as smooth, stable, and forgiving. Passengers praised the quiet cabin, especially compared to the louder Boeing 747, and spotters adored its sleek lines and unusual proportions. A handful of airlines still operate the A340 today, mostly in niche roles. Lufthansa continues to fly the type on certain long-haul routes, and smaller carriers in Africa and the Middle East have kept them in service. The aircraft's long range makes it useful for specialized missions, even if it's no longer economically ideal for mainstream operations. In fact, the A340 has achieved a kind of second life. Some have been converted into VIP or government transports. Others are used for charter services or even as test beds for experimental projects. The jet may not be the backbone of any fleet anymore, but it refuses to completely disappear. The irony is clear. The very feature that once made the A340 unique, its 4 small engines, eventually doomed it. Yet that same quirk is exactly why aviation fans will always remember it. In the final part, we'll sum up the legacy of the A340 and why, despite its flaws, it remains one of the most fascinating jets Airbus ever built. The Airbus A340 will always be remembered as a paradox. On one hand, it was a safe, reliable, and beautifully engineered solution to the regulatory challenges of its era. 4 small engines gave it global reach and unmatched flexibility in the 1990s. On the other hand, the rapid rise of ETOPS certified twinjets like the Boeing 777 meant its core advantage disappeared almost overnight. But that's exactly what makes the A340 so fascinating. It's a snapshot of a turning point in aviation history, a time when safety rules, technology, and economics collided. For passengers, it offered some of the quietest and smoothest flights ever. For airlines, it was both a blessing and a burden. And for aviation fans, it remains an icon, precisely because of those tiny engines that sparked so much curiosity. Even today, when most A340s have retired, the sight of one lifting off with 4 slender engines still turns heads at airports. It reminds us that aviation isn't just about efficiency, it's also about bold ideas, experiments, and designs that capture the imagination. If you enjoyed this journey into the skies, don't forget to like this video, leave a comment with your favorite A340 memory, and subscribe to James Avia for more aviation stories explained simply and clearly.